So let's talk about what happens if they don't give you two ordered pairs. There are going to be some problems in ALEKS where they're just going to give you a line. Now here I had to make it very pronounced because I don't have graphing paper where those 2 points are. On ALEKS, they're just going to give you the line. They're not going to give you the little markers and points. What you're going to do is find a point that sits right on the grid mark, because they're going to give you graphing paper. So don't try to find this one where you can see it's like not quite at a unit 1 negative, not quite at -2, and you might not know what this is. Is that a third? Is that a fourth? Is that 2/3? Is that... Don't guess. Try to find one that meets right on a mark, an integer, okay? So for me, since I don't have grids, I said this mark and this mark. Guys, don't let that fool you if you go and look on ALEKS and you just see a line. Just find ones where you can get the coordinates pretty easy because they sit on those little hash lines so that you can get integers, not fractions or decimals. So for us to do this, just get the coordinates. Once you get the coordinates, then it's going back to finding the slope given two ordered pairs. So all you need to do is figure out what the ordered pair is for this and what's the ordered pair for this point. Now remember, an ordered pair, if you forgot, has to have an x and a y value. X goes first, y is second. Same thing here. You need to have an ordered pair, x and a y. So to figure out what the x value is, we talked about this in 3.1, just take the marker and go up to the x line. Remember, that's your x axis, that's your y axis. So when I take this point and go up to the x, I found that this is 1, 2, 3, negative. And then for this one, where it hits my y, is at 1, 2, negative. Remember how I said any point that's in this quadrant will have negative, negative. And we know any point found in quadrant number 1 will have two positives. So let's check. X, remember, go down to your x-axis and found out that it's a 1. And then for a y, go over to our y-axis and find out that's 1, 2, 3. Now that you have your two ordered pairs, then we know from visually that I know my final answer, my slope has to be a positive number. Because if I read my graph, going from left all the way up to my right, you see I'm going uphill, increasing, positive. So let's get our actual number. Let's calculate it. Remember, we said for us, slope is parentheses minus parentheses. Remember, that's our change in y's over our change in x. Remember, subtraction is change. So now, let's see how my y's change. Now, because these are points, who has to say that this is point number 2 or is this point number 2? We don't care. Remember, I said just pick a direction. So, hey, if I read my line going left to right, then I'll say I start it here and I end it here. So start, remember, y's first. Negative 2. Remember, the other y, where I end it. 3. Let's do the same thing for x's. I start over here because I read from left to right, and I end it as dot x. So x to x. Negative 3 to a 1. Okay. Once I have that, then what you're going to do is just calculate by simplifying. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. And now we can distribute. So we're going to get a negative 2. And over here we get a negative 3. The bottom, I get a negative 3. And here, I get a negative 1. So what I want to do next is collect my two tops my tops are both integers. They're both constants. So a negative and a negative, remember? Same label, so add 2 plus 3 is 5. Who wins the tug of war? Team 3, so team negative. And then a negative 3 with a negative 1, 2 negatives, add. And then who wins the tug of war? 3 players. Now always you want to reduce your slope. Negative 5 over negative 4, I'll tell you, if you put that in Alex, it's going to mark it wrong. Because this is not simplified. You know that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So our answer is going to be 5 over 4. Leave slope as a fraction. Do not convert it into a decimal. I know that 5 over 4 is 1.25. Do not do that. Alex wants it as a fraction. I know some of you say, well, I can put this as 1 and 1/4. 1 and 1/4. Leave it as an improper fraction. That means if you can divide 4 into 5, but it doesn't go in evenly, you have a remainder, leave it like this. I don't want you to say 1 and 1/4. Leave it as 5 over 4. Make sure that the signs are reduced though. Negative divided by negative is a positive. When you look at this graph, you can kind of see, yeah, I knew it was going to be a positive number. Now, some people do remember your rise over run, and that's another way of doing this when you have a visual. So start from the bottom and then rise. Now this is where you have to be careful. If we're going to this point, notice my finger is going up. So when you go up, it's positive. If my finger was going down to get to the next point, then that'd be negative. So rise means kind of like a claw machine, going up or going down. So I went up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to be parallel to this point. And run means I move my claw left to right. If I move my claw to the left, it's a negative number, but if I move it to the right, it's a positive. So how many spaces do I have to move to get to this red dot? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got the same answer. The reason why I don't like rise and run too much is because you still have to reduce the fraction. You have to remember if you're going up, that's positive, that's going down, that's negative, and same thing, left is negative, right is positive. And other people forget that you have to connect point to point. Some people will count just to here or just to the axis. You've got to count all the way up, all the way to that red point. Okay? So since we already know how to do it this method, continue on doing it this method. Just get the coordinates and then you can plug them in, and then there's your answer once you reduce it. And just look at the picture just to make sure it makes sense. If this was a negative number, but your graph looks like this, you must have forgotten a sign.